Last week I posted this on Threads, and while most of the responses were overwhelmingly positive and most people said that they understood and agreed with what I was saying, there was a little bit of pushback, and that's why I wanted to make this quick video to kind of show my background and to help you guys to understand and to see that me saying this is actually an overwhelmingly positive thing. The only way to give full context on why I make this statement is to give you guys insight into my story and how I got here to my point in my life as a Barbadian. So I was born and raised in Barbados, but my mom is actually from a neighboring Caribbean country, and I felt like because of that, she was a little bit hesitant to give me, true exposure and to allow me to do a lot of the things that I think the average Barbadian would do from a very young age. And I think that's totally understandable. If you're raising a child in a completely different country, you're not gonna, want them to do things that you aren't necessarily 100% comfortable with or aren't customs from your home country. And so what this led to was that I actually had to do a lot of the things that you would consider to be stereotypically Barbadian on my own when I came of age, which I don't think necessarily makes me a huge outlier, but I do think gives me a little bit of a different cultural, culturalization than, let's say, the average Barbadian. With that being said, I was always a person who felt a little bit stifled in Barbados. I felt as if, there was a lot more to see, a lot more to do in this world. And so I spent a lot of my time during my adolescence trying to see how I could position myself to potentially leave Barbados when I came of age. Now, I was really fortunate I had the opportunity to go overseas and live in the US for 5 years. And during that time, I gained a lot more world perspective. And during this time, I think I did gain a new appreciation for Barbados, but it did definitely help me to see a lot of the, other ideologies and other pathways that you can take that aren't necessarily accessible and available for you on a small country like Barbados. Now, when I came back to Barbados, this was actually during the height of COVID, and I spent some time in isolation, really just building. If you're someone who, builds online, then you'll understand you go through that build phase. And by the time it came for me to reintegrate myself back into Barbados, I definitely felt like a returning national, maybe even an expat. I felt like if I had been so far removed from the country just from, living abroad, number one, but then number two, I felt like the country itself was kind of almost like restructuring post-COVID. So during this time, I actually had the privilege of being able to coach some kids from, expat communities. And one thing that was clear to me very quickly was that their experience of Barbados and the way how they were living was totally different to how I had as a kid, and that their experience was different to what I would say is the average experience, of a black or just a Barbadian in general. My other exposure to a lot of personalities in Barbados comes primarily through football. So in Barbados, football is primarily lower socioeconomic status, and I feel like this is how it is, for a lot of sports in a lot of different places. Like people play sports as a way out. And so the people that I was able to come across from football and the stories that I would hear and the way how I hear them describe their living experience and what they experienced in Barbados was also so different to what I had seen on a day-to-day basis. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say that I ever felt sorry for these people. They did have their own, walk of life and their own way, and I feel like if they loved and appreciated that as much as I loved and appreciated my experience of Barbados. And finally, as someone who went to one of the more historic high schools here on the island, the mix of, cultural and racial diversity at my high school was extremely broad. And I think that added to that, being an athlete kind of gave me a little bit more flexibility, gave me a little bit more, freedom, if you want to call it that, and acceptance to flow a little bit more fluidly through all of these socioeconomic and racial groups. And so from high school, I was able to make friends with, white Barbadians, light-skinned Barbadians, Indian Barbadians, all these different people. And I would say that at our core, the most beautiful thing was that there was still an understanding of what it meant to be Barbadian. And so this brings me to the point of the post, which I think is actually overwhelmingly positive in the sense that even though you are from, one of these different, let's call it socioeconomic statuses, Barbados is a place where if you really wanted to, you could go and penetrate and mix with and make friends and, utilize whatever spaces it is that you want. With that being said, I think if you ask the average, let's call it, expat Barbadian or black Barbadian, if they wanted to, go to certain places and eat certain foods and, mingle with certain people, they would probably tell you no overwhelmingly because they do have their own spaces. They do have their own, people that they would much rather spend that time with. So I don't think it's a matter of being, selectively secluded. You can think things such as, apartheid, South Africa, or even like the situation going on in Israel right now. It's nothing like that whatsoever. Like, yes, there is some division, but that division is much more, I would say, like chosen and like circumstance than necessarily like high walls being put up around certain demographics that completely neglect, you know, the others within society. After living in the US and also traveling to the UK and parts of Europe, I love how, you know, open and honest I think people in Barbados are when it comes to these scenarios. I think it's easy to put your head in the sand and say that these divisions don't exist. I feel like in Barbados it's accepted that these things exist, but it's also accepted that you stay in your own lane, you do what really makes you happy, and if you do want to venture out, if you know, really want to have new experiences, it's totally up to you to get yourself out there and to get yourself into those spaces. With that being said, would you feel completely comfortable going into some of these other spaces? Like, that's a conversation for another day. And I guess, you know, people are people. So we're all going to have our unconscious biases and that type of stuff. I'm not saying that there's no bias that exists in Barbados whatsoever, because a lot of people will say, you know, that the average person will treat a tourist a little bit more nicely or eloquently than a local. But overwhelmingly, the ability for people of different races and socioeconomic status to intermingle, cohabitate, and I feel like make the most of our beautiful island in a very peaceful way is a very beautiful thing. And I believe that is something that is worth, you know, experiencing at least once if you're potentially like thinking about visiting Barbados or even moving to Barbados for a short or extended period of time. In other news, guys, in my recent video, I spoke about how I'm really stepping into this coaching space now and how I'm really trying to help athletes specifically basically untap their potential. When I first started making these videos, I was pretty adamant about doing in-person coaching, but one thing that's come up again and again is how busy athletes are, and I totally understand how busy I was at that age as well. You know, you're doing your sport, you're trying to do school, you're trying to, you know, hustle, make some money, work, whatever on the side. The privilege of an athlete to just do their sport is one which many people don't get. I only got for like a very small period during my career, so like I totally understand. And the fix for this is to see how I can put together programs that can give you guys the knowledge that you need to take action on these strength programs and that type of stuff by yourself, or even in collaboration with me virtually when you just have an hour out of your day and that type of stuff. And that has been the model that I see most of you have been comfortable with so far, and that we've started moving forward. And I can't wait to see exactly the level of results that we can start to help players to achieve. If any of that sounds interesting to you, you know how to get in touch with me. With that in mind, this week I'm going to finish putting together something I'm calling the Bulletproof Blueprint, which is basically a culmination of all the movements that I've used from my personal experience to rehab my knees, help with my hip and ankle mobility. And I know my training routine at this stage in my life is not as rigorous as it was before, but I can wholeheartedly say that my body feels much better than it ever has. And I think it's because of not just lifting heavy, not just getting up and being active, but really focusing on, you know, taking care of these like smaller muscles, things that you might overlook, and really like putting together that whole link, that whole chain that really allows me to perform at my best. It was something that I wouldn't say I neglected, I just didn't know about until I was basically done trying to become a professional athlete. And had I known these things and was I implementing these things from 15, 16 years old, I was really gifted and blessed that I was never injured. But I do genuinely feel like my performances would have went up, as well as my ability to recover and get ready for trainings and games in a much more timely, much more structured manner. Finally, guys, last week was the second week of Beach Hit. Now, I didn't get a chance to film, and for this, I don't want to make it sound like if I'm making an excuse, but on these mornings when I get up, like even on a normal day, I am not someone who's like going for my phone. I'm not someone who's thinking about, I don't know, making content so intuitively. This is a habit I'm really trying to create for myself. And honestly, guys, like I know this is no excuse. And next week I need to get the camera on. But on Saturday when we got out on the beach, I was like straight away locked in on the progress that the clients had up until that point. And I was ready to get us going towards making sure that we hit our times and that we run a smooth ship. So yeah, stepping into this coaching role has not been totally easy for me, guys. It's something that I've delayed for a while, a little bit, because I felt like I need a little bit more, you know, knowledge. And I think the big overwhelming thing was that I wasn't sure if I actually had enough knowledge to be able to, you know, create change and to help other people. And I think that now I've actually started stepping into this space and listening to requests. It's something that I think comes quite intuitively to me, and the biggest joy that I have is really just, you know, seeing other people be able to go from a place of having this problem of, you know, whether it's perceived or real, and helping them to work through that to a place where they can tap into their potential, whether that be physical or mental. So for anyone who's put their trust in me, for anyone who has like supported me on this journey, I want to say thank you so much. Even if you've watched this video until this point, like leaving a like goes such a long way to helping it to go out to other people. And if this is your first time here, highly recommend that you subscribe. I do videos like this, and I also make some, you know, deeper dive videos where I give like straight up values, straight up content, actionable tips on how you can, you know, build online and potentially even orient your personal habits for growth. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments on anything I said in this video, please leave them down in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, take care. I'll see you in the next one.